So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will briefly introduce you to the Youth Encounter on Sustainability. The YES program was launched in the year 2000 on a platform of a special alliance between the University of Tokyo, MIT, Chalmers University, and the ETH Zurich. Since 2009, the program is run by Actis, a spin-off organization of the ETH. So, what do we do? We hold multidisciplinary and multicultural courses of 2 weeks where we talk about different aspects of sustainability. We also organize special courses on specific topics such as nutrition, water, or social entrepreneurships, and many more. Last year, we founded the YES Alumni Association with the aim to more effectively use the potential of our network and ensure ongoing exchange and learning processes within this network. Now, the outcome of the YES program is not only personal inspiration of the participants, but also YES has proven to be a very fertile ground for initiatives addressing global challenges. One example is the International Student Initiatives for Action on Global Change, the origin of which goes back to the Academia Engelberg conference in 2004, where the YES group initiated the project, Forest Policy Project, which was financed by the Academia Engelberg and later on implemented in the forest policies of Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Mexico. Given this background, we see our role in this conference not only in providing inputs from multicultural perspectives, but also in emphasizing on the link between personalized medicine and the sustainability discussion. In previous presentations, we learned a lot about the great and exciting benefits of personalized medicine and its potentials, especially to increase individual well-being. Now our group will also focus on some challenges we might face, considering the impacts of personalized medicine on individual and social well-being. It's a great pleasure for us to be here, and we would like to thank the Academia Engelberg for this inspiring and sustainable collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. So now I would like to call for the first speaker, Abhishek Thakur, who is from India. He has a Bachelor in Commerce and Economics, a Master in Management, and a PhD in Organization or Organizational Behavior. Please.
Thank you so much. I feel happy to be here, and I feel very privileged to be here. Privileged because it's a wonderful gathering, and also because it's my opportunity to share a view of a huge chunk of humanity. So my presentation is called Medicine for Millions. I bring in an emerging economy perspective to personalized medicine. And when I say an emerging economy, an economy that's growing at a rate that's faster than the rest of the world, an economy that's perhaps in the process of catching up with the rest. So India's growth has been from a cow-worshipping nation to a car-worshipping nation. If you'd have come in 1950, you'd have seen lots of cows. Now see streets clogged with a lot of cars. The development actually has excluded a whole set of people. So our Prime Minister, and there's one part of the Indian economy that looks really lovely. You have healthcare that's growing at 15% for the next 10 years to become a 280 billion sort of economy. 15% of the richest are spending money, 50% of their spend. And lifestyle diseases are coming. So there are diseases related to the heart, related to a relaxed lifestyle. But there is also the India 2, which has a very low spend in terms of GDP, and this can be said of several emerging economies, which would spend about 6 to 8% of their GDP, compared to the developed world, which would spend about 12% or over. And the GDP is also lesser, so the net quantum of money being spent is really less. And we're still fighting a lot of preventable diseases with very low resources. So the way we see it, personalized medicine is likely to be perceived from an economic opportunity angle. So there are cutting-edge healthcare possibilities. We already have limited resources, and hence the challenge of using those resources well. And an example of groups of people, so when we say 13% of northern India doesn't respond to 30 plus essential medicines, we're talking about a huge number of people. We're talking about 100 million people not responding to certain medications. So what will make a difference really in acceptance of personalized medicine in India? The political will in our country and emerging economies is relatively lower. So India, for example, has only 17% of healthcare spending as public spending. The private sector spends most of this. So 70% in G8 nations. So in a developed country, governments spend more. In India, it's the private sector that's spending more. Institutional leadership is medium. We have about 3 million NGOs, so there is a social sector that's delivering healthcare. We want to produce answers to local issues. There's strict limitations on disclosure of data. And economic benefits are really high. So one research talks about the upside of about $500 million for a typical customized drug. So what comes across is the fact that it's the private spending and the economics of this, and hence business being the driver for growth. As with India and other emerging economies, culture plays a very big role, and hence the way a country will respond will be in a very cultural context. So cultures and values are the lens through which any country will examine these issues. And in India, for example, any discrimination or even a possibility of discrimination based on medicine has very strong reactions. So we have reservations of up to 50% for scheduled castes, for tribes. So there's already discrimination, which is a big issue on the minds of people. Competitiveness is very high, and there's a middle class that aspires to grow, and that again drives the consumption of medicine. General mistrust of the government, and for example, Indian eating habits. So we're talking about 40 million people facing diabetes. So specific local diseases also, which are very culturally strong. So Indian food full of spice, full of sugar, but I mean, we can't help but eat. There are several issues around health. So we are talking about one doctor every 250 people. We're talking about one hospital every 70,000 people, only 10% having health insurance, 65% regions lack of essential medicines, 4 deaths a minute due to preventable diseases. 20 million fall below poverty line due to health indebtedness. That's expenses due to health make people fall below poverty line. And this one, 16% of population in India and 1% of global healthcare spend. So we are talking about a 16-fold increase will only get us at a global average of health spend. So there's a long way to go. And Fatima will cover this in detail in her next presentation. So here is a cartoon where there's somebody from the developed world, and it says that the tech support person says that she will talk only if I'm from a caste that she can talk to. So caste is a big issue. So we have personalized medicine in terms of Ayurveda, where each patient was prescribed based on their own composition. The diversity of population is very high, which makes a strong case for developing drugs for specific groups of people. And we are talking about very large numbers here. There's genetic predisposition to certain illnesses. Same caste marriages. So there is much more homogeneity within groups. And an example is a community called the Parsi community in India. About 70,000 people who've been marrying and inbreeding for a few hundred years now. So the genetic specialization per se is also very high. Individual choice very often does not matter because a huge chunk of individuals are very tough to even educate and inform. And hence, it's business which will build solutions and really market them. An emerging economy would look at personalized medicine as one more chance to catch up, one more industry to take a lead in, one more area in which we can specialize. From a sustainability angle, we look at three different matrices: social, environment, and economic. And we see the socio-economic issue in terms of equitable access as being one of the biggest hindrances. Who do you provide medication for? A rising middle class or a mass which doesn't have access to even basic health care? And in conclusion, I'd say that economic opportunity could be the primary driver. So if you're looking at investing, it's an industry growing at 15%. Or if you're looking at supporting in terms of financial aid, there are a whole set of people who do not have access. So either ways, it's an emerging economy will tend to look at it very economically. Cultural context will determine the extent of change in behavior. So I would caution saying that a lot of behavior changes and similar results may not apply because the culture is very sticky and very strong. And finally, solutions that can go to masses hold promise to meet challenges of a country like India. And these are answers for a rapidly growing health challenges. So solutions that can go to larger numbers are essentially what will solve a whole set of our challenges. So that's pretty much a view from an emerging, growing economy like India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We decided to proceed the following way. If you have few short questions on understanding of the issue, you can ask them now. But for the other type of question, we keep all of them for the general discussion we will have after the presentations. So is there one or two questions concerning the content, precisions, or these type of questions? If not, thank you very much. And we will have the next speaker, Fatima Farzana, who is from Pakistan. And she has a BSc in Life Sciences, a Master in Neurosciences, and a PhD in Neurosciences. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it's working. Okay, it's my second time in Academia Engelberg, and it's always a pleasure to be here. Although I just started on my PhD in neuroscience, I'm not a PhD as yet. But today my presentation is going to deal basically with access to personalized medicine in a poor country, financially poor country like Pakistan. And my second part of the presentation would be a little slightly based on how a Muslim, strongly Islamic country like Pakistan would perceive personalized medicine. So when I think of personalized medicine in Pakistan, it sounds pretty funny to my ears because something so technically specific, although which the drugs can be produced for masses, is still from a long way from what could be in Pakistan. Because if you just look for the top 5 diseases in the country, people die from strong form of influenza, which is respiratory infection, from hepatitis, from malaria, from diarrhea. And just like as Abhishek mentioned in his presentation, that in India, people generally tend to die from preventable diseases for which cures are already present, or most of the time they just need better standards of living, potable water, or proper housing. And if we have a look at the top 5 programs of the Ministry of Health of Pakistan, which has certain kinds of programs for better health care, it is basically like dealing with neonatal and child health care, of hepatitis, of malaria, and polio eradication. I mean, polio is like a non-existent disease in the first world country. And there are nearly 20 million people who have no access to any form of healthcare. That means the healthcare workers, the doctors, these 20 million people don't ever reach to them. So they tend to cure themselves with local kind of traditional herbs or medicines, or they basically die. I happened to, when I was working on this presentation, I happened to come across a very interesting paper which did a cross-sectional study of pharmacies in Rawalpindi. It's the city where my parents live in, where I go back when I visit Pakistan. The cross-sectional study was done on 311 pharmacies, and they tried to see that did the pharmacies met the standards of the national standards of the Ministry of Health of government. And they found out that only 19.3% of the pharmacies met the licensing requirements to be a pharmacy. And a pharmacy could just look like this, which is just right next to a dirty street, open. And some of the interesting statistics were that like many of the pharmacies had a refrigerator for vaccinations, for drugs. But in a country like Pakistan, where electricity shortage is very common, only 4% had an alternative power of supply. So what do you do with the drugs when there's no power supply? They can just go into waste. So even if we developed drugs based on personalized medicine, people do not even have access to it. And what do they do about, whether it's a personalized medicine drug or it's a normal medicine drug? One of the interesting findings, again, the 22% were qualified pharmacists who had been to a school of pharmacy. So the rest of the people, they get trained, they get knowledge from the industrial representatives, and they tend to have a greater, drug sale irrespective of prescription. So imagine having people who have personalized medicine, they go to a doctor and have their genome sequenced, but people, they just tend to, go to a pharmacist and tell them their symptoms and get a medication over the counter, because going to a doctor is either too expensive, there is no access, or it's just too cumbersome. So when keeping this, these facts and figures in view, that I think of personalized medicine, first of all, the health and healthcare infrastructure has to be developed before we can have any kind of personalized medicine to be brought in. The preventable diseases have to be prevented. And we know very well that the pharmaceutical companies do not work too much on building medication for the poor countries, because they simply would not make much money. So that is, which is why I do not see personalized medicine and making a great impact in half of the world, because Pakistan is one example, but that's the case for nearly half of the world. Now, the second part of my presentation is slightly related to how would the Islamic world perceive it. Now, that is just a very big topic for an individual like me, because I certainly cannot talk about the Islamic world, which ranges from Indonesia to Morocco. But I try to bring in some views as a Pakistani. So what does Islam say on such topics? Islam is in a religion, in this religion, there are certain guidelines which are very clear and cut, which is that there's one God, Allah, you should pray 5 times a day, and there are certain injunctions which are very clear. But there are many topics in which Islam does not have any specific guidelines. And for that matters, it has been mentioned 3 times in Quran that you should do consultation. There's a whole chapter in the legislation of in Islam which is called Shura, and it literally translates into consultation, that people should reach a consensus. And there's this very famous saying from Prophet Muhammad that in consultation you should, people who are going to be affected by the decision and the people who are going to implement the decisions and others should come together and consult amongst each other before reaching a decision, and there is no way that people can go wrong in such kind of consultation. Secondly, the concept of fate and destiny, that how does Islam perceives fate and destiny? That is divided in 2 ways. One, So one is when you have a fate or destiny is made by, and the intention, the action of a human being, that he has to work towards a certain goal. He has to put in that effort. And the second part comes in that there has to be the will of Allah, that if you work towards a goal and if you achieve it, then the will of Allah was part of it. And if you do not achieve it, then as we say often in the Western world that, well, it was not meant to be. And that's what this is, that, it was not meant to be, like the case over here, that the will of Allah is not involved, but the intention, the action of human being has to go in towards improving his lifestyle, improving the medication and working towards it. So now this, when Islam is such a practical and dynamic religion as it is, why is it that it gets lost in translation by the followers who practice it? So at least for the understanding of Islam, I can give some perspective on Pakistan. Part of the reason is that nearly 50% of the people are illiterate. That means they cannot read and write, and that's irrespective of which language we are talking about. And the 50% who can read and write, they generally read and write in Urdu, which is the national language, or sometimes some of the local regional languages. So when that is the case, how do they understand Quran, which is in Arabic? And it's the case with me as well, because I do not speak Arabic. I have to understand Quran. I'll read translations and explanations of different peers, different scholars, and come to a conclusion. But for those people who are illiterate, either they tend to follow what has been followed by their parents, their grandparents, and keep on with the tradition, or they consult with the people who do have the knowledge of Quran. And that is where things tend to go wrong. Those people who do have the knowledge can sometimes be the imams of the mosque, and that they can tend to be like, they can tend to bring the masses into a certain direction, which can be politically, economically, or just personally motivated. And that is where things tend to be misinterpreted by the masses generally. So when I think of personalized medicine, the impact that it would have in Pakistan, I think of one group of people who would accept it with to a certain degree, and some who would just go all the way. The others would, just like as it would be in a normal, an ordinary Swiss would like to do. But the second one would be people who are complacent, who would say that if it is the will of Allah, I will get the disease and I will get cured from the disease, or else I will not get cured, so why should I bother? They will be confused, and this is one thing that, that needs to be removed very easily. And people who are confused, because when they do not know what a gene is, what a genome is, and how do you deal with this, they cannot even conceptualize the reasoning behind this kind of medication. So if we can bring them this knowledge, then it can be like this group of people can at least be brought towards personalized medicine. The last two is the thing that I myself get worried about quite a bit, is the ones which would be religiously motivated, or could be religiously or just out of fear, that they actively avoid it and they want other people to avoid it too. Or they are just simply fearful of it because they don't understand what is the basis behind it, and they are confused of it as well. So in conclusion, I would like to say that personalized medicine in a country like Pakistan will not have much impact unless we have a good basic healthcare structure and the preventable diseases are being prevented. People do have cancer and heart diseases. They are definitely dying from it, but that's just not on the top of the list for Ministry of Health or for majority of the people. And especially in terms of religion, the ordinary man has to be educated, has to be taken into confidence, and to be realized that there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, they can be, and once they are educated, they can conceptualize the meaning behind it, they will definitely accept it. And lastly, I would just like to leave with one quote, which is that there's a very famous African proverb that if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, we have to go together. So if there's 1/3 of the world is coming up with kind of a healthcare medication that excludes the rest of the 2/3 of the world, then definitely we are not going to go very far. And the world right now is a far more small, globalized, interconnected place than it ever was before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for this very nice and interesting and stimulating presentation as well. Is there questions of understanding?
I would just like to make a short comment. Thank you, Fatima, for this wonderful and very challenging presentation. And I think you've brought us a very important lesson that up till this point, this has been a very Western-focused, maybe even hyper-Western-focused discussion. Top-end technology, top-end services, everything focused on the individual. And you reminded us that given the current state of the world, the genetic medicine, personalized medicine, is probably irrelevant for half of the people living in the world. The need is basic sanitation, basic health services. In Pakistan at this very moment, the issue is not what your genome says. The issue is flooding for the second year in a row, which means people have no clean water, they have no food, they have no nutrition, and that is a recipe for medical disaster. And I would add, even in the US, even though we are a member of the G8, so we can't be said to be a developing economy, maybe the best description is an unraveling economy. And the priorities there, I think, would be to improve the health delivery system, and in particular to depoliticize the health delivery system before we start to introduce this sophistication.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, so I believe that we have to consider a lot of other options before we can think that PM would have a large impact in the world. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, but this is exactly the type of question we would like to elaborate on afterwards in the general discussion. Okay. So, is there a question of understanding? It's not the case. You were very clear. Thank you very much, Fatima. The next speaker will be Rodrigo Santos. He's from Brazil. He has a BSc in biology and a master in applied ecology and conservation. And he will speak on one issue of personal medicine in his country.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Oops. Good afternoon, everybody. I will talk about personalized medicine applied to sport and its potential impact on individual development. What I mean here with individual development is not concerned about the biological development. It's about the personality. It's about the potentialities of the individual to realize themselves in the society. So it's a social approach. Sport was internationally recognized officially by the United Nations in the 1978 when countries signed the International Charter of Physical Education and Sport. And the first article of the Charter states that every human being has the fundamental right of access to sport, which is essential for the full development of his personality. So physical exercise, sports, they are very important to keep our mental and our physical health, and they can combat stress and they give us a general feeling of well-being. And in a broader context, it can help, it can promote cohesion of communities by strengthening the social relations. So that's why sport is also useful as an instrument for, to promote development and peace. So sporting confederations, they start discussing about the importance of personalized medicine to sport, especially after many recent records of the so-called sudden death. Sudden death is when an athlete dies suddenly during a sporting match for any apparent reason. And the first record of the sudden death dates back 500 years before Christ, when a young messenger ran about 25 miles to deliver the news about the Greek victory over Persians. And after that, he just collapsed and died. And the most important factor causing sudden death is due to congenital abnormalities of the heart and blood vessels. And athletes who have died suddenly, they show no symptoms. So that would be the importance, one of the importance of the personalized medicine in the sport, because it would be useful for early diagnosis and prevention. However, with the advancements of genomic science and technology, now we have new doors opened for personalized medicine in sports. This is because achievement in any sport requires many complex, diverse skills, which are somehow, to somewhat extent, influenced by genes. Genes related, for instance, to body type, to musculature, pain tolerance, responses to injuries, and also motivation and perseverance. Actually, as many as 500 genes and DNA markers may be related, may be associated with athletic performance and fitness. And there are many genes that are now that have been used for testing athletes, especially this ACTN3, which is responsible for the development of the actin protein in the muscles. So now, if you want to do a test, such kind of test, it's available in the market for a very cheap price. There are many companies that do such a test, but the question is, who should perform this test? Who should do this test, and for what purposes? In the Article 6 of the Charter on Sport, they say that the scientific research must be oriented in such a way that it does not allow of proper application to physical education and sport. And this is not a topic to be discussed in the future. Actually, in my opinion, the improper applications of personalized medicine is already happening. And I will give you an example. It's perhaps an extreme example, but in China, there is now a government program that they use DNA information to discover genetic gifts and to discover the most promising future of children. So children from 3 years old up to 12 can perform this test. If the parents want they to perform the test, they go there and they are analyzed for their IQs, for focus, concentration, body types, ability to sports, and among others. So the program has also been used not just in sport, but also in art and music. And the program was considered to be successful in China, so now they have many companies that can also do the test, provide the test for people in general. The cost is about $800. You can screen the DNA of your children if you want. And now I would like to share with you my experience on this. When I was 12 years old, I started training table tennis, the famous ping pong, and I was actually very good. And after 2 years, I had already won about 120 championships, and with 15 years old, I was Brazilian champion. But since I used to travel a lot for the tournaments, at the end of the year, I failed to pass in the school. And my parents, they became very sad because they were very proud about me when they are talking to their friends, because I also had some good marks in the school. And they stopped supporting me in the table tennis. And for me, if I remember now, I can say that it was one of the hardest time of my life. My relationship with my parents changed completely. And I felt very frustrated because I could not play table tennis anymore, and also felt guilty because I didn't meet their expectations. So just for you to have an idea, when I was 14, I used to train about 4 hours a day, every day. And according to this article, this guy here has 19 years old, and he trains 6 hours per day, every day. And he lives 7 hours from the sporting center he trains. So I can imagine how big would be the pressure. And I mean, I'm not Chinese, but I'm sure that these young people, they feel a pressure from the society, from the parents to meet their expectations. And I don't think that this problem will just stop because with or without personalized medicine, this would still happen. But I think personalized medicine could amplify this problem, because now they think they are genetically determined to be a champion. It's I think they will feel much more pressure, much great pressure to meet the expectations of their parents and the society. And it's also about, I think that parents, they should give support, they should encourage children to do sports, but to respect their own choices in what they want to do. I mean, they should not persuade or convince their children to do what they want them to do based on the belief that they are genetically determined to do something. And then this reminds me the frightening vision of the future of Aldous Huxley in this Brave New World, a book where children are created artificially, and they are brought to conditional centers to be trained to perform specific tasks in the society according to the government's interest. So actually it's about the freedom all individuals should have to choose their own future, to decide what they want to do, and not be persuaded by their parents because of they believe this or they believe that. So the question here is, should parents have the right to perform genetic tests on children aiming at discover talents or to test for behavioral attributes? And what would be the implications of the indiscriminate use of genomic information on individual development? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for giving this very specific view, but it just illustrates how important the sport is in your country, and it gives a different perspective to our meeting as well. Question of understanding. If not, we will go. There is one.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I liked it a lot. And I think you talked about the selection process in sports, right? Now, my question, do you have also found evidence while you did your research on actually activating performance through, for example, vectors carrying myosin elements, for example, or something like that? So really gene...
Sorry, could you repeat, please? I could not follow you.
Okay, sorry. So did you also find some evidence that actually there's some gene manipulation being used actually to trigger performance as well?
Well, actually, what I limited my research on the use, on the supposedly indiscriminate use of the genetic information in this, in trying to find talents, but I could not find any evidence of a more specific use of the genetic information for training or for to be applied in these children. I mean.
Okay, thank you. So we had 3 talks from foreign young students, and we now give the floor to the Swiss students who are from the Swiss Study Foundation, and they are coached here by Claudine Leisinger, who is in the audience. And they decided to make shorter presentation, and 3 of them will give each a short presentation. The first one will be Shu-Yang Xu. She has an MD from the University of Zurich, and she is presently an MD PhD student in cell biology at the ETH in Zurich.
Thank you. Yeah, we are 3 students from the Swiss Study Foundation, and first I want to say a couple of words to this, what we are. And the Swiss Study Foundation exists since 20 years, and it gives an interdisciplinary platform for motivated students, and there are courses that will give us skills to take responsibility in society. Okay, we are presenting the Swiss view, and each of us is making a statement, and I'm starting with the impact on diagnosis and treatment of personalized medicine. So in contrast to the talks that we have previously heard, especially to the very impressive talk of Fatima, Switzerland is in a very luxurious situation, and actually talking about personalized medicine is also luxury. In Switzerland we have an ideal environment for personalized medicine. We have enough money for research, and we have a top quality healthcare system that is also able to implement all the new technologies that is coming, and also the patients have high expectations in the medical world, and also part of the pharmaceutical industries who are very strong in Switzerland. They are interested in developing new drugs. One could say it's luxury, but it's also reality that personalized medicine is here in Switzerland. And in science, you had this great exponential increase in knowledge based on the Human Genes Project. And the researchers, the Swiss researchers, are excited to explore all those functions in the human genome and the expression of genes and also the interaction of genes. And the pharmaceutical companies, of course, they want to provide smart new diagnosis tools, and of course in patients' care, doctors want to provide new solutions. So to get most of this dynamical process, a very important point is actually the collaboration between these stakeholders of healthcare. And at this point, startups and clinical trials, they should merge, or they should, all three parties should participate, so that there is a good translation from basic science to the patient. And of course, the patients are also a very important group here. And as a young doctor, I would like also to make a personal comment, and it has been discussed in this round that the patients should get more informed, which is very true. And I would like to become an endocrinologist in treating metabolic and hormones diseases. And if I have a patient who's newly diagnosed with diabetes, for instance, the first thing I would do is to encourage the patient to know as much as possible about his disease. So I really encourage personally really think that platforms such as Patients and like me, they are very useful, and also doctors welcome it. But there's still something irritating about it. If you say that patients fire their doctors, this is not correct, and this is not the way we should go, because just if there is a conflict, there is a miscommunication between the patient and the doctor, and this is the problem. So what I would like to say that in developing personalized medicine and also the communication between the healthcare providers and the patients, dialogue and communication is the most important. And the dialogue is not only luxury, it is a necessity to translate the knowledge that we gain from basic science and basic research and to translate it into clinics. And it is, of course, also an opportunity to improve the overall healthcare system, and it hopefully also has a benefit on developing countries later on. Thank you.
As these are rather statements, I think there is no need for a question of understanding. So the next Swiss contribution is from Fabian Jenny. He has MSc in quantitative biology and system biology from the University of Zurich, and is presently a PhD student in molecular life sciences, also at the University of Zurich.
So, good afternoon. As you've already heard, I have a slightly quantitative background. So I would like to start with some numbers on the topic of disposition and awareness in Switzerland. So maybe start with disposition, which is, from my point of view, at least easier. We are a population in Switzerland which is growing rather old. So diseases like cancer, grow in weight in our healthcare system. So now the numbers of cancer, in 2008 we had an incidence of 35,000 cases a year. So which means that we have 35,000 new cancer cases in Switzerland. We have a mortality of 15,000 a year for cancer only. And I mean, these numbers just indicate for one class of diseases where personalized medicine really could help and make an effort, that the need is there, the market is there, so the possibility to enter is here given in Switzerland. Now, the more complex part of what I'm going to tell you about awareness is how to measure it. I mean, there are no representative questionings within the population which tell us how much they know about personalized medicine and how they see it. So we need to take another measurement, and therefore I chose, for example, media reports. There are wonderful tools, especially on the internet, where you can go into the databases of newspapers. I sub-selected some, among which are the new Neue Zürcher Zeitung, the Blick, which is a little bit the gossip paper in Switzerland, the Tagesanzeiger, also Zurich newspaper, and 20 Minutes, which is a free available newspaper, which is distributed usually at the street. And if you look there under the keyword personalized medicine, from the year 2000 to now, there are only 130 articles covering that, among which most of them are investor-related information. So, for example, Roche invests a lot in personalized medicine, and this might be a hot topic, so buy their stocks. There's nothing, or only very little, about the information of personalized medicine, what it is. So people might know rather little. So is this bad? Of course it is. Most of you probably know we have a direct democracy here in Switzerland, so citizens should participate, and they usually, at least in some cases, need to decide on, lawmaking. And at a certain point, I mean, our legislation already did some work with concerning laws, with the initiative for the federal law regarding genetic examination on humans, but still, people should know about it. And, that's of course a problem, and that's maybe a task we should then carry out when we leave this conference. Tell the people what is personalized medicine, what are the efforts, so that they are really becoming aware. But there's also a statement I would like to make regarding awareness, that this lack of information is not necessarily such a big problem, because personalized medicine, as I see it, is not a wonder weapon which will be at our disposal at once. It will come in bits and pieces. Some bits and pieces are already there, as we've heard. And so people will learn to live with it. They see the output, they will see first results of initial treatments by personalized medicine, and, we'll learn to live with it. The only maybe big controversial which we will encounter, and not just in Switzerland, is probably on personalized genomics. So how much should we know, how much we need to know, and as we've seen until now, these are also the major topics which were discussed in the plenum. And yeah, with that I would like to close. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Fabian. And the next speaker, or the last speaker, also from Switzerland, is Micha Gundelfinger. He's a medical student at the University of Zurich.
Good afternoon. I had the task of thinking about ethics and social aspects concerning personalized medicine here in Switzerland. And I thought about what specific ethical issues there are that concern personalized medicine only. And a lot of them were already discussed here in the last couple of days. And some topics were discussed just now by my colleague. So I will not repeat said things. And I think that if we refrain from making slippery slope arguments to try to construct ethical problems for this topic, I don't see many big obstacles in the way, actually. I don't think it's that problematic. We have the GUMG law, which states that discrimination on the grounds of genetic information is illegal in Switzerland. For insurance companies, and for employers. So this is good to know. And I also think that the ethical fears and reservations in the broader population are mostly due to a lack of information about what is going on in the research, what the scientists and the experts are doing, what goals they are trying to achieve. Personalized medicine holds a lot of promise and potential, and as we have heard many times today and yesterday, there is still a lot of research that needs to be done. And for this, we need to collect and process large amounts of data, which is, again, information. This time, information that we want to flow from the population to the experts. And for this enterprise to succeed, it is crucial that the population is on board. So I think that educating the public is very, very important. I once heard a story that if you hear something bad or witness something bad, like someone doing a bad deed, this will stick with you very, very strongly in your mind. And it will take a lot of work and a lot of positive instances to reset your opinion. So in this direct democracy we have in Switzerland, as my colleague said, the scared citizens actually have the possibility to get up and to restrict research. This has happened and can happen again. So for public acceptance and to get the participation of the population, we need a good and broad public education. We need correct information to flow from the specialists, from the researchers and scientists to the public, and we need it rather today and now than tomorrow and in a couple of years. Also, the doctors need to be informed better, especially about companies like 23andMe and patients like me, who also hold a lot of potential. But we have to be, as we have seen, we have to be careful that we don't get these two groups, like the health caregivers and companies like this, into antagonizing corners. This would be an obstacle for this whole enterprise. For example, Patients Like Me seems to me like a very good project. What the speech was very good. It promises huge benefits, and probably the most benefits if it is used by doctors and patients together in a joint effort to improve on medical therapies. And this might be easier if Mr. Haywood showed a bit less negative attitude towards doctors and medical caregivers, as a side note. So what I think is that we really need this increase of information flow from the experts to the public, and that this will enable the reverse information flow of data into the research, so that soon patients and doctors alike will be able to benefit from personalized medicine. And yeah, I hope to witness this in the near future. Thank you.